Good afternoon. It's the appointed time. We have a quorum. I call to order the panel on security meeting. Item number 1, information paper issued since the last meeting. There is one, a letter from Dr. Fernando CHEUNG and Mr. Ka-chun to ask me to schedule a discussion about detained persons being battered. Well, I have forwarded the suggestion to the administration, and in the agenda in meetings that are soon to come is included. The second item is custodial and detention management of the Hong Kong Police Force. This is upon the request from a number of members. And I'd also like to draw your attention to a submission from Society for Community Organization. It's been tabled. Please ask the administration to come in to join us. And I'd like to remind you that today we have quite a lot of items on the agenda. So I will be quite strict with time limit. If you would like to speak, please raise your hands. Let me read out your names. Kenneth Leung, M. Chuck Ting, Michael Tian, KK Kwok, Ronnie, Jimmy Ng, Ronick Chen, Pun Siu Ping, Elizabeth Kwok, Claudia Mo, and Mr. James To. And I would like also to welcome to the new Secretary for Security, Mr. John Lee, and his team. They are Principal Assistant Secretary for Security, Mr. Andrew Zhang, Assistant Commissioner for Police, Mr. Kong Man Keung. On top of that, there is a Chief Inspector of Police, Ms. Kitty Chick. Please take us through the paper, Secretary, before I ask members to ask questions. Thank you. The police has always been fulfilling the duty of care owed to detained persons. So in formulating policies, procedures, and guidelines for custody and detention of detained persons, we strive to ensure the security of detained facilities and safeguard the safety of detained persons and those who might be in contact with them. Well, the police will take into consideration the situation and proportionality. Individual circumstances will be taken into account, say for example the offences suspected to be committed and also past records. The police will also attach importance to privacy of detained persons, as well as making sure that all records are properly kept. The detained procedures will be properly recorded, and all rules will be strictly abided by. Each detention cell will only detain one person to reduce the harm caused amongst detained persons to each other. Well, there is designated police officers at every detention facility responsible for the reception, safety, security, and welfare of detained persons. There is also proper records kept to ensure that the security, safety, and hygiene meet the requirements concerned. There are also procedures regarding people under special watch. They are those with a previous record of serious and violent offences or offences involving firearms or explosives. Those who are suspected of or charged with serious and violent offences or offences involving firearms or explosives. Those who are detained on behalf of other government departments or the ICAC, where there is a special request, and those who have previously escaped from custody who are thought to be of high risk, and those who have expressed or known suicidal tendency. During the entire period, these people under special watch will be under the watch of dedicated officers. We strive to enhance the procedures and conduct regular reviews to enhance safety standards to protect the privacy and rights of determined of detained persons, we have put in place a number of improvement measures, namely installing hot water shower facilities, installing shower cubicle doors, raising the height of toilet walls, and install metal plates, install electric fans, upgrading toilet flush system, repainting the cells, install signs and provide religious books, and also put in place a number of measures to reduce the risk of detained persons harming themselves. We will ensure their safety as well as take care of their privacy. 14 members have asked to speak. We have a very tight schedule, so those who would like to ask questions, please give an indication as soon as possible. Each member will have 4 minutes. When you hear the bell, you need to stop. First, Kenneth Leung. Thank you. Well, Hong Kong and the UK have signed the ICCPCR, which is an international convention regarding political rights. As far as I know, in recent years in the UK, in detained cells, CCTV has been installed. And there are some cases in European Human Rights Court saying that CCTV installed in detention cells may have an impact on privacy. If you look at laws regarding privacy in European countries, they have imposed a higher requirement than those in Hong Kong. However, there are court cases showing that installation of CCTV will prevent escape from detained persons and stop detained persons from harming themselves, and these are reasonable measures. So, in relation to installation of CCTV inside a cell, not the area where the detained person uses the toilet, what's your position? Or do you have to conduct further studies? Secretary. Mr. Leung talked about using CCTV to facilitate management and to ensure safety. We subscribe to that view. In paragraph 12, we have mentioned that there are some recommendations from the coroner's court. And as a matter of fact, in the detention facilities in police stations, there are CCTVs. Currently, these are installed in exit entrances and also corridors. Mr. Leung asked about CCTV inside a cell. The coroner's court has made this recommendation, and the police are taking this into active account. But we have to consider privacy and legal issues, because when the recommendation was made in the coroner's court, apart from capturing images inside a cell, it was also mentioned that recordings will have to be made. We have sought legal advice. The legal advice we obtained was that they have to pass the proportionality test and a necessity test. So we are exploring how to meet the proportionality and necessity. One of our ideas is to use technology to mask a certain spot designated inside a cell. Say, for example, when the camera captures image over that location, it will automatically become pixelized. Our prime concern is to ensure safety. Well, our current measure in place is that there is at least one screen showing exit entrances, and it's constantly monitored. And on top of that, do we need to make recordings? We have to overcome all difficulties. If the law allows it, and if we don't infringe upon privacy, we are willing to go down that road. In Germany, they stopped short of doing that because of similar issues, whereas other countries, that has already been put in place. Mr. Lam Check Ting, thank you. Paragraph 8, it says that people who have been arrested or who are suspected of committing violent offenses and serious offenses, they will be put under special watch. Does it mean that, that someone will inspect them once every 15 minutes, or there will be an hourly inspection of detention facilities? Has the frequency been increased? What about people who have been arrested or suspected of serious and violent offenses? In relation to paragraph 7, that is for everyone, and paragraph 8 is about those under special watch. And people under special watch will be monitored in accordance to what is stated in paragraph 7 and 8 as well. Under paragraph 7, it says that, there is a duty officer inspecting the detention cell at least once every hour, and at the same time, there are police officers inspecting them once every 25 minutes. And if someone is of a suicidal tendency, then there will be more frequent inspection, and on top of that, there will be special facilities put inside these cells to cater for that case. Does it mean that if someone's under special watch, then that person will be watched around the clock?
Mr. Kwong, thank you, Mr. Lam, for the question regarding the special watch. Now, generally, if we know, and according to observation, the detainee has a suicidal tendency, I'm not talking about detainees with suicidal tendency. I'm talking about those who have a previous record of serious and violent offenses. In that case, we will have arrangements to put them under special watch around the clock, yes. I think what is on the agenda today, I think we have this item on the agenda because in May 2017, a detainee committed suicide at the Samao Ping police station. Was that detainee a person who was put under special watch? He was accused of committing offenses of rape and robbery, and that would be serious and violent offenses. Well, I understand why Mr. Lam is asking this question, but there will be an inquest by the coroner's court, and I'm sure the coroner's court will also take into consideration the point raised by Mr. Lam. So since there will be an inquiry going forward, I understand I don't want to interfere with the inquiry, but my question is whether or not the suspect concerned or belong to the category of someone who has been involved in serious and violent offences which warrant the special watch. To decide whether or not to put a detainee on special watch, that would be the decision of the person in charge of the investigation, and he will have to, recommend that to the duty officer. This is the chain around the waist of the suspect on the day of his arrest. You said that for special people who are put under special watch, they will need to be put into a handcuff transport belt. So was this suspect also a person who was put on special watch? Secretary, you know that I am always in favor. I agree that we should install CCTV system. I think in this regard, Hong Kong is too lenient. When police officers, discharge their duties, they should, you should, and also in respect of enforcing traffic laws and so on, there are many things in which the CCTV can help, especially when offences are being committed. In the last few years, many of the cases offenses have been detected because of CCTVs. Apparently, what you've said just now was that other than the passengers, you agreed that we should install CCTVs almost everywhere. So according to your what you've told us, the only question now is whether or not video recording should be allowed. That is a legal issue, and I'm sure you can amend the law later on. Now, if someone had been keeping watch, the incident concerned would not have taken place. Now, without a CCTV system and your officers have to watch the suspect, then you'll be under a lot of pressure. Now, this time, in future, if you have a designated officer watching the officer around the clock, and if anything should go wrong, you'll be under a lot of pressure. Are you prepared to bear that pressure? I think Mr. Michaelton was right. First of all, as far as position is concerned, we fully agree that the CCTV system can help us with our management, and also in terms of determining responsibility and obtaining evidence. If video recording were allowed, that it would be even better, because it could be evidence when there is an inquiry by the coroner's court. And if recording is allowed, and everybody would be more vigilant in what they do. And this is what the police would want to do. But we need to tackle several issues. First of all, we have to ensure that privacy is protected. We have already sought legal advice from the DFJ on this point. As I said, whether or not we can take video recording, we don't have video recording yet at the moment. The legal advice we have is that if we were to take video recording, we should have strong justifications to prove that it is necessary and that it is, it is justifiable. And if there are certain problems that we can overcome, are there other technical solutions to overcome the problem? So as I said, whether we can rely on technology. When privacy issue arises, could we mask some of the areas of the cell when we take the recording? Now, I hope you can explore whether or not you can take video recording. But if you simply monitor the detainee, would that be all right? Even if we monitor the detainee, there would still be a privacy issue, because we're taking a footage of the place where the detainee, is resting. So privacy issue is certainly there. So we need to seek the advice of the privacy commissioner. We really would like to, do it, but but before we can do that, we have to ensure that we can protect privacy on the one hand and not breach the law. Dr. Tate Kwa, we have 2 people died in 2014, in 2015, 2016. The coroner's court had asked the government to do it twice already, and in May this year there was another suicide. So I'd like to ask the Secretary, how many more detainees will have to be to die before you would take action? How many, Secretary? Dr. Kwok, first of all, the coroner's court into the case in Aberdeen made a series of recommendations in 2015, most of which we have implemented already. I've asking about video recording. When I answered the question by another member, I've already said that the police would like to make video recording, but we must be able to comply with the law first. If we could overcome those issues, we'll be happy to do so. Dr. Ko, help you know that we would like to, take video recording. It's not that we don't. So how long will you need before you can overcome those issues? We hope we'll be able to do that ASAP. We've sought legal advice, and we've been told that we need good justification and explain clearly what we are going to do and why we want to do it. And we've also learned from other jurisdictions and learned from the experience. In advanced jurisdictions like the U.S., we asked them, and such U.S. and France, we found out in some countries they do, in other countries they don't. For example, in Germany, they do not take video recording. We want to find out whether or not it's because of privacy issues. So I like to state categorically that we want to do it. We're exploring, all the options that will allow us to do that. But we must be able, first of all, to overcome the legal, issues. I'm not forcing you to do it. I'm not giving, but at least you can give me a timetable. You can't simply say that you will continue to look into this. It's not that we're just looking into this. I've already sought legal advice from the DFJ. We are trying to overcome all the difficulties, and once we have a viable option, we immediately seek the advice of the Privacy Commissioner. We are already taking action. As for legal advice and how long it will take before we can overcome all those issues, and also when we have recommendation from the previous commissioner, how long it will take for us to overcome those issues, I can't give you an answer, but we will do it ASAP. And once we've overcome all those hurdles, we'll come back and to members. So I'd like to emphasize that both the police and the Bureau would like to do it. Chairman, I don't think he'll be able to give us an answer. Recently, there had been an incident during which many detainees were not properly treated. For example, male officers were patrolling the facilities where female detainees were kept. And this is obviously a discrimination against women. And secondly, some of the people who were detained were sick and they were not allowed to take their medicine. These detainees were suffering from asthma, and the police would require them that if they really need to take the medicine, they will be taken to the casualty ward. So why are you depriving the member of the public the right to take medicine if they were sick? I'll ask Mr. Kwong to explain the answer to the question regarding the administration of medicine, and also whether or not you have any detention facilities for women. We have procedures and guidelines for our duty officers when patrolling the detaining cells. If the duty officer were a man, and there's no problem if he were to inspect the cells for male detainees, but if he has to go to a detention cell for female detainees, he would need to be accompanied by, first of all, a female duty officer would need to inspect the cell before, and is satisfied that it is suitable for a male officer to inspect before the male officer will go into that cell. And we also, you members also learned that there will be the detention cell will be inspected once every 25 minutes, and we would ensure that in this case only police officer of the same sex as the detainee would do that. For the taking of medicine, if the detainee has make such a request, we immediately arrange for the detainee to be taken to the hospital or clinic for medical consultation. If there is an outbreak of asthma, sorry, your time is up. I'll need to allow other members to ask questions. Mr. Nguyen Ka, thank you. When the last administration responded to a written question by Mr. Kenneth Leung, we understand that in the last 5.5 months, the number of suicides in detaining cells were more than 170. When these cases happen, did the police conduct relevant investigation? Did you carry out reviews, and what have been the following up actions? The Secretary said the legal advice was that if you were to install CCTVs or to take video recordings of the detention facilities, you will need to You will need to satisfy the justifiability and proportionality principle. You have 177 cases of detainees committing suicide. Would that be a basis to justify video recording? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ng. I think the number is already given in the annex. Every year we have 20 to 30 odd attempted suicides, but the actual number of suicides, there had only been about 4 cases in the last 5 to 6 years. To ensure that the detainees can guarantee the safety, that is a duty of the police. And we do not just rely on the CCTV system to ensure the safety. It will only help us ensure all the measures are in place to ensure the safety. What is most important is that there should be police officers patrolling the facility to watch them. So whether it's the police station or other disciplinary forces with detention facilities, the focus has always been on patrol by the officers. But even if you can see something on the CCTV system, the immediate thing is you have somebody to deal with it. So if you have people patrolling facilities every 25 minutes, so within 25 minutes, in theory, if the detainee wants to do something, it would have been found out. Of course, the CCTV system can help, but from the management perspective, relying on the CCTV system alone may not fully satisfy the requirements.
There are other circumstances. Say, for example, when the person is put in a detained cell, there will be a thorough search, there will be regular inspection, and there is also record kept by a senior officer. And if it's facilitated by CCTV, that's right. In the past, every year there has been like 20 or 30 attempted suicides. Does it mean that it gives us grounds to install CCTV? That's one of the justifications we use. Yes, it's a fact, and there were people who attempted to harm themselves. Apart from CCTV, there are also other records. Mr. Ng just now mentioned about proportionality. That is, how much do we do? If we can have more people deployed, in theory, the need for CCTV is reduced. But of course, in different police districts, there are different limitations on manpower. We don't use just one measure to overcome difficulties. We adopt many different approaches because we want to get things done. We will learn from overseas experience, and we will come up with a stronger reason so that we can overcome difficulties we face in relation to privacy and also legal issues. In May this year, there was an answer given to question. Out of 45 police stations, 33 of them have got detention facilities, of which starting from 2010, 13 of them will start or have already undergone renovation. So after renovation, the detention facilities of the 13 police stations, will they meet the latest standard and requirement? How much do you spend on each of them? Is there a timetable to renovate the remaining 20 police stations? How much will it involve? Do they have to come to LegCo to ask for funding support? Thank you. In 2008, the police started a review on detention facilities, and a number of measures have been put in place. They're all completed in 2012. However, since then there has been some continuous improvement on a number of areas. First, security. I've told you about details. 2, on detained persons' rights and welfare. Say, for example, shower facilities, a clock in all detention facilities, ventilation, and religious books. You must understand that some police stations are of an older design, so more has to be done. We have to take a number of factors into consideration. First, to enhance facilities to meet various demands without affecting the operation of the police station. And in some circumstances, we may need to juggle things and relocate facilities to ensure smooth operation of the police station. For details, I will defer to the Assistant Commissioner. I think Mr. Chen was talking about the Central Wong Tai Sin and Chun Wan police stations renovation work starting from 2010. We aim through these renovation works to install air conditioning systems. It's only with air conditioning systems that we can change the meshes into reinforced fiberglass. This will greatly reduce detained persons to find a secure spot to harm themselves. So this is quite a major structural change, and we need time to follow up. There are also 9 police stations that have undergone site inspections and will soon see renovation started. Apart from changing to reinforced fiberglass walls, we also improve the soundproofing installations in detention cells and also and interview rooms, and also special interview rooms for vulnerable persons. Mr. Alvin Young. Well, paragraph 8 of the document, Special Watch. It mentioned here that, well, those who have an expressed or known suicidal tendency. Just now, the Secretary mentioned about it's the the officer in charge of the case to decide whether someone needs special watch. However, the officer in charge of the case may not know about if a particular person has suicidal tendency. So are there any special trainings given to frontline officers? So based on what criteria do you use to assist the OC case to decide whether the person involved has a suicidal tendency or not? Thank you. Apart from the OC case, there is also another supervisory level. I'll defer to the Assistant Commissioner. We have a 2-tier structure in place to make arrangements for persons to go under special watch. First, there is the OC case, who is conversant with the details of the case, facts of the case, background of the detained person. That's the first tier to make an assessment to see if that person needs special watch. If so, then the duty officer will have to inform the divisional commander. The duty officer will inform all police officers in the report room and what special arrangements will be put in place. This is the first tier. The duty officer will make a professional judgment based on on their professional knowledge. Say, for example, by checking past record to see if that person has a known record of a suicidal tendency. The duty officer will also look check in detail the person's demeanor, any physical signs, scars that suggest that the person may have suicidal tendency. And that is the case without a special notification given to the duty officer. So the duty officer may exercise his professional judgment to decide whether someone needs special watch. So the Assistant Commissioner knows that is practically saying that the duty officer is equipped with the knowledge, because the OC case may miss it. You still have the duty officer. But duty officers are very busy. They have to be in the police station to deal with many different matters. Does it mean that the duty officers have undergone training to gauge whether someone has a suicidal tendency, and they will have time to make an assessment? A duty officer is a very experienced frontline officer. So the duty officer has an edge over other police officers. Apart from the professional knowledge and the experience, we also have the police intranet to check to see if there has been any past record that the person would need special watch. The duty officer may not be the person who is actually doing the inspection. So based on what will the duty officer make the judgment? Say, for example, if someone with a suicidal tendency, the duty officer will have a chance to check whether there are any old wounds, scars, and also a chance to watch the demeanor of the detained person. This agenda ends at 3:20, but we still have 10 more members who would like to speak. So I would like to ask if anyone who would like to speak, I'll draw a line here. Anyone who comes after will not be allowed to ask questions. Mr. Christopher Cheung, and then Miss Priscilla Leung. Mr. Pun Siu-ping. Just now, a number of members have asked follow-up questions about the recommendations of the Coroner's Court. I want to ask, in paragraph 9, it says that between 2008 and 2010, there was a comprehensive review of detention policy. You have put in place some enhancement measures covering 8 of them. Between 2013 and 2016, there are about 32 attempted self-harm or suicide cases every year. So, have you assessed the effectiveness of these measures? And in paragraph 14, it says that the police constantly keep reviewing the policy. And in June 2017, there was a Custodial Management Committee chaired by the Assistant Commissioner of Police Support to study areas such as procedures, concern facilities, environment, information technology support, as well as training and frontline communication. So is this an internal committee? Would there be outside people in this committee, and when will the review be completed? In June, we set up the Custodial Management Committee. A meeting was convened in June. In the first meeting, we have set down 4 areas to follow up on, including procedures, policies, facilities and environment, information technology support, as well as training and frontline communication. There will be 4 subgroups following up on these 4 areas. They will make recommendations to the Custodial Management Committee. The subgroup members of the subgroup and the committee will all come from the police, from personnel, development, and also different formations. Anyone who has suggestions to make about detention and management are welcome to give us their views. Does it mean that is something like the review done between 2008 and 2012? When do you think this review will be completed? Well, all issues related to detention and management will be covered. This is to further enhance our facilities, both hardware and software. It will cover rights and safety of detained persons, as well as security. We aim to do better. The report of the review will be published. Secretary, we will report to the LegCo. Miss Elizabeth Quat. Well, it is not rare that people would inflict harm onto themselves or commit suicide. Between 2007 and 2017, there has been 177 attempted suicide, and 4 of them succeeded. We're talking about life and limb. And you talk about proportionality in your consideration to install CCTV. Well, this is to ensure safety and to facilitate the police.
And the CCTV system. What about the guidelines for the whole procedure? Are they clear enough? For example, under what circumstances would it be necessary to have a full body search? And when you transfer the detainee from one cell to another, will the detainee need to be searched? In your procedures, do you have clear-cut guidelines? And also, since you now have 13 detention facilities being renovated, there are 20 yet to be renovated. Before they are renovated, what measures do you have to ensure the safety of these detainees? Thank you, Ms. Kwok. I'll try to answer some of the questions, and I'll defer to Mr. Kwong to answer the rest of the questions. Regarding our current detention facilities, although we have set up a committee to look into how we can improve them, before improvements were made, the responsibility of the police is that we should, we will do our work, prudently. And of course, when these renovation works are completed, of course, it will help us do a better job. But even before the improvements were made, I think the current facilities now already has to ensure that we can, protect the safety of the detained persons. So we have regular, inspection and patrols, and we have CCTVs to enable us to see the overall situation. Not only, of course, we have to overcome some privacy issues inside the detention cell. All these measures do not just rely on a single factor, but rather we should, we relied on the aggregate of all the measures to ensure safety. Well, to answer Ms. Kwok's question, regarding the safety of the facilities, the duty officer will need to look at the safety, hygiene conditions, and security of the detention facilities every day to ensure that they're up to standard, so that we can provide the best environment for the detained persons. The amendment also asks the question, that is, for a detained person, if in the course of his detention, he's taken out of the cell, and when he's taken back to the cell, will need to be searched again. In 2008, we actually conducted a review. Before 2008, if a detained person were taken out of his detention cell for investigation or interrogation or taken to the scene of the crime, and when he is taken back to the detention facility, it was compulsory that he should be searched again. In 2009, the security panel set up a committee to look into the question of search on detained persons, and a review was done as to whether or not such a detained person would need to be searched again. The committee felt then that if the detained person had already been before he was admitted into the detention facility, he has already been searched, and he has since then been subject to under the custody of the police. And the members of the committee then felt that when the detained person was taken back to the cell, he needn't be searched again. So we accepted we agreed. So we accepted the recommendation, and therefore we changed our guidelines. And that is, if the detained person be taken out, and then if he were returned to the detention cell, then the duty officer will conduct a risk assessment. After he will assess whether or not, when the detained person is brought back to the police station, is there any possibility that he might inflict harm on himself and the extent of such harm caused. After making such a risk assessment, he will judge whether or not another search were necessary. So after we've conducted that review and listening to the recommendation of the committee, we've adopted the new arrangement since then. Today we're talking about custodial management, and I think this is really ironic. A few days ago, we saw a series of news photos saying that Mr. Man Yun from the League of one of the Democrats, when he was taken into the police van, he was already, assaulted in broad daylight. You see such police violence under broad daylight. I don't see how you can explain yourself. Today we are focusing on the question of custody. But I'd like to point out that you say that all the facilities are so good, you have all these guidelines in place, and the commissioner said that everything were in order. But not only are you damaging the relationship between the police and the public, you're also hurting the confidence which the public has in the police. So what while you say one thing, what you do is something else. We ask you about the question of medicine, that is whether if a detained person who is suffering from asthma, would he be allowed to take the medicine, or even basic, things like providing hot showers, or questions like may officers inspecting a female detention cell. You still relied on your. You simply quoted your guidelines. So what is said in the guideline is something, but reality will paint a different picture. We're talking about a question of trust here. I'd like to ask the Bureau and the police whether you have any response to that. Thank you. The case referred to Ms. Mo, I understand, has been the subject of a report and complaint to the police, and CAPA will be looking into that investigation. I understand the person concerned demands that this be treated as a criminal investigation. Of course, the police would have procedures to handle such complaints. For cases like that, we can only find out the truth after we've conducted an investigation. The police will, interview all the witnesses and so on. So we will leave it to police to carry out the investigation. Ms. Mose said that while we have the guidelines, but how about implementation? Of course, we do have guidelines in place, but in terms of enforcement, and whether they are properly enforced, and that we will need a supervisory system to ensure that there is compliance. We have officers of different ranks within the police force. The duty officer already played, a supervisory role, and within the police we also have district commanders and officers, and he has the authority to monitor the implementation of various measures. For detained persons, we would require full records to be taken if an incident happens, and in the course of an investigation we find out that certain police officers have not performed some of the procedures. We will deal with that accordingly. For this particular case, say at a certain detention facility a detained person committed suicide, then the coroner's court will conduct an inquest, and if any problems were identified in the inquest, follow-up measures will be implemented. Would please respond to the question of trust? I think that's difficult. We still have 10 more members yet to ask the questions. Mr. Ma Fung Kwok. For the 4 persons who had committed suicide while in detention, one such person killed himself with a USB. He hanged himself with a USB. For the other 3 cases, what instruments did the persons concerned use to end their lives? Of the 177 attempted cases of suicide, what tools were used? Do you have a breakdown of such tools used by the detained persons to kill themselves? Secretary, thank you. Of the 4 cases referred to in our paper, in February 2014, the person hanged himself with his clothing. The second case, October 2014, another case in Yau Ma Tei, again, the person killed himself with his clothing. In July 2014, there was another person who hanged himself with a blanket in North Point. In May 2017, the case in South Mauping is currently under investigation. For the first and second cases, the coroner's court already had dealt with that. The second question was the 177 cases of attempted, suicide. What methods or tools were used? I don't have the information offhand. I'll ask the Assistant Commissioner whether thought he could answer the question. Overall speaking, perhaps he can give us a rough breakdown. I don't have the detailed breakdowns with me, but there have been some cases where certain facilities in a detention cell which protruded itself slightly, and the detained person could use that to hurt themselves. But I don't have a detailed breakdown at this moment. Now let me ask another question. The government said that you will make a breakdown of the detained persons and you identify those who have a high risk of suicides. So what criteria do you use to identify such persons? Do you observe the behavior or background or what? Secretary. To answer Mr. Ma's questions, how do we determine whether the person should be placed under special watch? Now, first of all, we'll look at his previous criminal record, whether he has been involved in serious, cases of violence. How do you identify the person whether he has a suicidal tendency? Well, we will find out from his record whether he had attempted suicide, and if so, he will be under special watch. And also people who have committed offences which involve firearms and explosives. You may also have detained persons where other government departments would alert us that they should be put under special watch. And if the ICAC, for example, requested we put them under special watch, we would do that. So it's basically based on the previous record, the case in question, whether the person has suicidal tendency and what not requests have been received from other departments to put him on special watch. Would you also consider the possible length of detention or sentencing? Of course, if the offence concern were serious, then especially if it involves firearms or explosives or offences, violent offences, of course, the penalty will be severe. Mr. James Toh. Dr. K.K. Kwok asked a very difficult question. He asked how many more detained persons will have to die before you would come up with a better system. And of course he was referring to the CCTV system. He asked that question because for many years the government has been saying that they are working on the solution. Your attitude is positive, but you are not able to find a solution. But you must bear in mind that you're the government, the responsibility rests with you. Although I know that asking this question will make it very difficult for you because you also want to set up the CCTV system, but you haven't found a way yet how to do it. I'm a electoral member. Of course, I'm a bit of a veteran myself, and I have actually spent a long time, working with you to see whether we can come up with a solution to this problem. I have come up with some ideas which I would like to share with you and see whether or not it's feasible.
Let me try this. Say, well, leaving the special watch aside, you only have sufficient manpower to inspect the facilities once every 25 minutes.
15分鐘巡一次，即係如果我人手夠啊。
If there is sufficient manpower, once every 15 minutes will not infringe on the detained person's privacy, right? What about 10 minutes? I don't think it will infringe on the detained person's privacy. Well, you don't have sufficient manpower. Duty officers are very busy. I know that. So what about using technology? You said you have done research about many other jurisdictions. But I have actually thought about it. The idea dawned on me 2 days ago when I was reading a book, Robot. What about using a robot? Well, it will give you high-resolution image doing the rounds. And then the robot will be the duty officer. The duty officer only has to look at the screen. If you think, well, robot's too much, then you can build a track and have the CCTV installed on it. And then it will go to cell 1 and then go to cell 2 and do the rounds once every 10 minutes. You have to first see that something is happening before you go to carry out a rescue. That means the duty officer can just sit at their desk doing many things at a time and see what's happening in the, say, 6 cells in less than 1 minute, because with that system, it practically means the duty officer has done his rounds. Whether there is recording or not, it doesn't really matter. It boils down to one point, is an inspection. Thank you, Mr. Toh. I am very happy that we're all working together to try to find a solution. What you have suggested is, yes, attractive. It's worth exploring as to whether we can have a camera doing the rounds at regular interval, and there is an assistant commissioner looking into this. We are happy to hear any ideas that will give us a solution. Apart from that, there are other ideas that we have considered. First, some long-range method to measure one's heartbeat. We have actually thought about that. Say, for example, to measure the detained person's breath rate. Thank you for your idea. We will forward it to the committee. Mr. Nathan Law. I believe that, I'm the most serious person. A few days ago, I would have been detained for 28 hours, so it was a site visit. It was political, but there are many things that I would like to follow up on. For the first 24 hours, there was no police officers doing anything with me, no statement taken from me. Is it in line with police rules and regulations? Well, I'll leave that for later. Today, we're here to talk about detention facilities. A number of days ago, there are some companions of mine spending their time in the detention cell. There was one person who suffered from a fever, and that person's been waiting for 2 hours before seeing a doctor. There's another one who's on long-term medication. That person's been waiting for over 20 hours before that person was given medication. And if there was an asthma attack, I think that person might die. And there is also one, the detained person is a woman, but it was a male police officer doing the rounds. And I want to say that short war does not hide the person when the person's going to the toilet. So if you walk past, you can actually see what if the detained person, who is a female, going to the toilet, and it is a male officer who is doing the rounds. My experience is that there is simply not sufficient manpower. You said 25 minutes. I don't see that. I made a request and I had to wait for 1 or 2 hours. It has taken forever. So, with the various requests I've just outlined, rights of detained persons when requests are made, is there a mechanism to ensure that these requests are made within a certain time frame? Say, for example, someone who runs a fever, how many hours does that person have to wait? What about need for medication? If there is if mistakes are made by the duty officers, if there is misconduct, well, how are you going to follow up on that? I would like to first clarify one point and correct you on one point. When Mr. Kwong answered questions about male officers inspecting facilities for female, Mr. Kwong made it clear that, first of all, there will be a female police officer going in to check first to make sure that there is no privacy issues before a male police officer would enter. I'll now defer to the Assistant Commissioner. I would like to speak more about right to medical attention. I was halfway through my explanation. If there was medical need, and if the duty officer is of the view that the person requires medical attention, then as soon as possible. What about a time frame? Any performance pledge, say within 2 or 3 hours? Because as far as I know, there is a performance pledge for an ambulance to arrive. Well, we will do it as soon as possible. So no performance pledge. I need to clarify. Well, about asthma medication, whether it is allowed to be dispensed. Well, we have measures to ensure welfare. I'm afraid my question was not answered. Well, without presence of a female officer in advance, there was a male police officer appearing in relation to a female detained person. Mr. Law, if you have encountered such cases, please give us the information. If detained persons are not happy with the treatment they have received, they may lodge a complaint. If there is no time frame, then I ask the police to carefully consider setting a time frame to ensure the rights of detained persons are met. Did you hear that? Yes, we will forward it to the committee. Mr. Yu Si-wing, paragraph 7. It says that, well, the police will accommodate only one person in one cell where there is sufficient vacancy. Of course, that's best because you don't want detained persons to cause harm to one another. So, is it a frequent occurrence to have more than one person in a single cell? If not, well, will the police put in place measures to stop that from happening? Thank you. One person in one cell will ensure safety. However, when there are major operations, say for example, triad syndicate, there may be 20-30 people arrested. Sometimes there are cases with more than one person detained in one cell, but there won't be 2 people in one cell. There will be at least 3. Because, say for example, if there is a burly person inflicting harm on the other person, there's no one else there to call for help. And there is intercom devices in the cell. So, other than the exceptional circumstance or when there is a major operation, we will keep one person in one cell. And sometimes we will use facilities in other police stations. Is it a common occurrence to see fights, disputes within a cell? I'll defer to Mr. Kwong. I don't have the figures, but the Secretary's observation's right. It's rare. Mr. Yu? For those with suicidal tendency, there are 177 of them in the past 5 years or so. You conduct assessments. So out of the 177 people, did you do any assessment on them? I want to know about the effectiveness of your assessment, whether it is sufficient. How come that someone who was assessed not to be of suicidal tendency would end up taking their lives? There are some attempted suicide cases because of police intervention. And as to the actual number, we have to conduct an analysis. Mr. Yu gave us a very good suggestion. I will forward it to the committee. We will strengthen our measures when it comes to making assessments to find out if they have suicidal tendencies. Mr. Chiu Ka-chun. Well, I have heard what Mr. Nathan Law said, and I want to make it clear first. There may be a day when I become a detained person. And if that happens, I want you to bear in mind that I suffer from diabetes and I need medication. So please give me medication as if I need it as soon as possible. Just now, Mr. Law mentioned about protection of rights of detained persons. Timing is very important for someone who needs medication. So I hope that you will give us a time frame instead of saying as soon as possible, because that's rather abstract. And when it comes to life and limb, you can't rely on something abstract. I have some questions prepared. It's about justifiability, proportionality, and also expressed or known suicidal tendencies, as well as guidelines. I think the Assistant Commissioner's reply was a bit defensive. I'm sure that the police are professional. But when we ask about assessment of suicidal tendency, how do you define that? You said there are two tiers, the OCKs and the duty officer. I've been a social worker for 25 years. A lot of psychologists and psychiatrists said that it's difficult to identify someone with suicidal tendencies, and it's difficult to prevent. So no matter how much experience the duty officers had, it may not be foolproof. So how much time does the duty officer have to make the assessment? I know that you don't want to see even one case of suicide, but you make it out as if your system was perfect. When 2016 till now, there has been 31 cases of students killing themselves, and no one was able to detect that. So, how do you define an expressed or known suicidal tendency? Do police officers receive sufficient training to identify and detect as well as prevent?
Response, Mr. Secretary. We're also very concerned about the issues raised by Mr. CHU regarding medicine. First of all, I'd like to state clearly that, first of all, for any person who has such needs, the police must refer them to the hospital. If we don't have the medical record and without the medical judgment, we wouldn't know whether the person will need to be administered such medicine. We don't know whether that's the medicine prescribed by the doctor, and the police will not have the professional expertise to judge whether or not there will be any complications if he took certain medicine. So the person must be taken to the hospital. The police certainly has the duty to do that as soon as possible. As whether or not we need guidelines to ensure that we do this ASAP, we can certainly defer this to the committee to further study. And like Mr. CHU, we're also concerned about suicide. We will certainly we will not take this lightly. It's certainly a very important issue which the committee will look into. Mr. Ka-chun. If you don't put the suspect into a detention cell and you put him, in another facility which is being watched by a police officer, that's my personal experience. On Wednesday evening at 10 p.m., somebody, took my statement. He took about took about 5 minutes, and I have to wait for 24 hours. That is not reasonable. The best way to use police for the police officer, I think you should take evidence or statement ASAP. What I saw that evening was all the officers sitting there with us, and I don't think that is acceptable. And so ultimately, after we apply for bail, the situation changed. So if you could explain, yourself, you don't need to be the secretary, or perhaps you could be Einstein. The other question is about League of Social Democrats who was beaten up, assaulted by police officers. We were taken into the police van. If we were not arrested, we would not be taken into the police van. We asked them whether you were arrested. The police could not take somebody away. You have to make an arrest first. And I argued with you. Subsequently, I was taken into the police van, and then and it wasn't me, but Mr. Man Yun was being assaulted inside the police van. I've suggested many times that you should install CCTV system inside the police vehicles. Why can't that be done? Or you could do this. If the suspect requests that the CCTV should not be switched on, then it doesn't have to be switched on. It could be his choice. The suspect could, decide whether or not there could be CCTV recording. Same in the detention room. If I'm scared, I could demand for a video recording. If I want to protect myself, I would ask you to videotape the whole proceedings. So what you're talking about is nonsense. You always videotape other people. You have all these mobile video recorders on every police officer. So if I'm being arrested, taken away, Mr. Lee, you simply don't, justify yourself. If you respect the human rights of the person concerned, if I'm scared, I can ask the officer either to take the video recording, or I can also demand that no video recording be made. I should have a choice as a detainee. If I, for example, have a video recorder myself when you make the arrest, would that be allowed? No. When you make the arrest, you can take the recording, but we can't do the same. So it's for your own expediency that you always make video recording other people, and when other people demand a video recording, you say that might invade the person's privacy. So it's like the water, downstreams, saying that it's being contaminated by the water upstream. So I think you should video record everything, Mr. Ray Chan. I also like to ask the Secretary about the time limit for detention. The Secretary has said that there are procedural guidelines, but how do you draft the guidelines, and how do police officers interpret those guidelines are crucial. Today, according to the government's paper, we're told that the detained person normally will not be detained for more than 48 hours. So what I want to say is that if we simply say this, does it mean that the police can arrest you for 47 hours and do nothing, and in the last hour only then will they complete the taking of statements and arranging for bail and so on? Would that be in violation of the guidelines? For any detention which takes longer than what the procedure requires, it could be illegal or unlawful custody. So how do you draft your guidelines? I think it should be, you should complete the whole proceeding within a reasonable period of time. You either take the person to court or you release him. So in terms of risk management and manpower deployment, that would be the best thing to do. You don't need to detain the person more than what is not necessary, unless, of course, it is due to the need for investigation. So how do you draft your guidelines? Could you answer this question first? Mr. Chen is asking how long should a person be detained. Now, according to the law, we cannot detain someone for more than 48 hours. For any particular case under investigation, in general, when the investigation is completed, or if a certain person will not, even though he is released, affect the investigation, then when the procedure is completed, he should be released. Now, let me say this in more detail. Let's say if you have a case involving narcotics, on my list I may have 10 persons and I have arrested 3 suspects. In the course of my investigation, I may need to arrest another 7. In the whole investigation, if the release of the persons under custody may jeopardize my investigation, then police will have to bear that responsibility. So when we investigate in that case, when the investigation is concluded, then of course we can end the custody. I understand the investigation needs, but if the police are, detain a person for say 40 hours, would it have to explain, like what you said just now, that because you need to arrest 10 suspects and you've only arrested 3 and you're worried that if you release them earlier, they might tip off the others? Well, you need to provide a good justification. Well, any force, exercised by the police will need to be justifiable and proportional. Which law doesn't allow for a person to be detained for more than 48 hours. In exercising our power to make arrests, we have to bear in mind the need for justifiability and proportionality. Every case will depend on, we need to look at its own, according to its own circumstances. But sometimes the investigation may not be completed, so it would be for the officer in charge to determine the justifiability and proportionality, to determine how the detainee should be treated. Fernando, the Committee on Children's Rights recently visited the CSD facilities. We noticed that within the prison facilities, they do have video recording functions. And the director told us that the recordings will be kept for 31 days. I understand the persons detained by the police have not yet gone through the legal proceeding. They have not yet been indicted or found guilty. And because of that, the police think that they will need to protect their privacy. But for such video recordings made inside police detention facilities, I hope that such video recording facilities should be installed on police vehicles as well. And the footage you have recorded will not be disclosed to the public unless it is necessary to be used as evidence in court. Otherwise, there's no impact on the privacy of the person concerned at all. Instead, it is a form of protection. My assistant, Mr. Secretary, had been beaten up by your police officers inside the police vehicle. Just now, the media had taken some photographs of Mr. Man Yun, chairman of the League of Social Democrats, whose hair was being pulled by police officers, and he was forcibly, banged against the body of the police vehicle. A few years ago, my assistant, when he was beaten up by police officers, we already asked you to install video recording facilities inside the police vehicles. You said you're not interested then. Today, again, you're saying the same thing. I'd like to ask, what is the reason why you're not interested? Why, again and again, when these incidents have happened and you still believe that it is not necessary to install such recording facilities or CCTV within the police vehicles? Secretary. Mr. CHEUNG referred to certain particular cases, and these cases have been referred to the police for investigation. The police have heard the evidence of different witnesses before we can make a judgment and determination of what actually transpired and then come to a conclusion. I understand that the complaint has been lodged and the case has been reported to police already, so the police will deal with it in accordance with the procedures. The IPCC will also vet the report of the police investigations. Chairman, I'd like to stop the Secretary here. My assistant at last decided not to report to police or complain. So I think the Secretary makes up the case. I also find this regrettable, but I respect my assistant's decision. He has already resigned. He's scared. He's afraid. Of course, I would like him to formally report to the police and complain. This is a criminal case of police officers assaulting somebody. And even after my assistant has, explained his identity, he was wearing a name tag. He was, beaten up in the protest area in Lechko. This is a very serious case, but he chose not to pursue this any further. Now, let's not talk about this case anymore, Mr. Secretary. I believe my assistant. I don't think he is lying. But recently, it has been reported that Mr. Ng Man Yuen has been similarly assaulted. Police has been taken. So will you be installing a CCTV and recording facilities inside your police vehicles? Mr. CHEUNG is making a serious allegation. Although you say that the person concerned choose not to complain, I would encourage him to do that because you want to, investigate into just a serious allegation. Regarding installation of CCTV on police vehicles, we've explained this to members many times that police vehicles are used for many purposes. They will be used to carry witnesses and deployed in police duties. Sometimes the police may invite people to attend our functions, and they will also be sitting on these vehicles. When we install CCTV on the police vehicles, we have to find out whether or not is really will satisfy the principles of justifiability and proportionality.
Now we move on to agenda item 3, proposed implementation details of registered fire engineer scheme. This is a legislative proposal, so other legislative members are invited to join the discussion. I will first ask the Secretary to take us through the paper before I open the floor for questions. Perhaps, Secretary, you will have to compress the introduction further. Well, I also welcome from the Security Bureau, Deputy Secretary Mr. Vic Yao, Assistant Secretary Ms. Venus Choi, Assistant Director of the Fire Services Department Mr. Terence Zhang, and Senior Divisional Officer Mr. Zhang So-on. Well, I will be as brief as possible. In March this year, we will the Fire Services Amendment Ordinance 2017 was enacted to provide a basis for making subsidiary legislation. We will put in place a scheme, a registered fire engineer scheme, to enable us to allow them to provide fire safety, risk assessment, and certification services. I will now give you some details. In order to ensure that there is a stringent set of requirements of qualifications and experience, we will set down 3 ways for registered fire engineers to become eligible under the scheme. First, those that possess the relevant professional qualifications and academic qualifications and work experience. Well, we require that these persons to possess at least 1 year relevant working experience as well. The second type are those who hold bachelor's degree or higher degree relevant to the 3 classes of registered fire engineers, that is, in fire engineering, structural engineering, civil engineering, building services engineering, building surveying. They need to complete courses relating to the class and during the degree program or top-up courses, and at the same time possess at least 6 years of relevant working experience. The third type is a practitioner with at least 15 years of working experience and has completed recognized top-up courses. There will be a code of practice disseminated by the Fire Services Department, setting out practical guidance and also conducts to be observed, rules of disciplinary offenses. If a registered fire engineer is suspected of breaching the code, say for example, committing misconduct or neglect, the disciplinary board will inquire into the matter and may decide to reprimand, fine, or deregister temporarily or permanently the registered fire engineer. There are also some criminal offenses, say for example using false instrument, failure to give evidence, say for example, then the registration may be and someone who performs the job without any registration. All those works will have to be approved by the Fire Services Department. We will also like to ensure the standard of these certificates. At the beginning, we will vet about 70% of the certifications issued. We will disseminate details of our consideration and also operational details. We hope that in the first half of next year we will be able to introduce the legislation to the LegGo for positive vetting. Mr. Ronald Chan, 3 minutes, question and answers included. Paragraph 5, it says that the registered fire engineer scheme will apply to licensed premises in the annex. I hear that the administration is considering using a licensing regime to regulate these mini stores, and at the moment in the annex I don't find these mini storage space. In the future, will mini storage space be included? Will the licensing regime be expedited? 2. I know that where there is misrepresentation of false or provision of false information, then the RFE will have to be responsible as well. What if the information was provided by the previous RFE? Will the current RFE be held liable? And the Secretary said that at the beginning there will be inspection of 70% of the certifications. That means the department has practically taken up all the work. In the future, will this percentage be further adjusted? After the implementation of the scheme, we will conduct a review to see if we will expand the scope. Currently, it will only cover licensed premises, designated licensed premises. The reason why the scope is not expanded is because we have to ensure that the system will operate smoothly and all fire services requirements and standards are met. We believe that in about 2 years, we will know whether we are satisfied with the scheme, and then we will consider whether to expand the scope, and that is for discussion later. And currently, there are some premises that are not included. Say, for example, those mini storage space. Well, we consider the risks involved to be quite high, so they will not be covered. There are also others that we would consider adding to ensure that the fire services standards and requirements are not lowered. The second question, if it's the previous RFE that has committed the misconduct, then we will consider a number of factors, whether the act itself is criminal and whether there is any mens rea. If there is no mens rea, then that person is not liable criminally. Well, at first we will start with 70%. The percentage will be lowered because the purpose of the scheme is to provide another alternative to the trade. We have to exercise caution because fire safety is very important. So if we're satisfied with the implementation of the scheme, we may consider lowering the percentage. Mr. Nathan Law. I read from the paper, it says that the number of days it will take will be greatly reduced from 31 days to 7 days. However, it has not elaborated on the reason why there is a shortened time, because of more eligible people available, or there is streamlining of procedure. Can you elaborate, please? This is an area where a correct understanding is required. Say, for example, in an eatery premises, the current procedure will take 17 working days. With the new scheme in place, we assess that it will only take 5 days. Because, yes, supply has increased. There will be more people who are eligible to take up the work. So it will be a reduction of 17 to 5 days. And when it comes to verification and issuance of certification, currently it will take from checking to issuance 14 to 17 working days. Under the new system, if RFEs are engaged, it will take about 2 to 3 days. Because the RFE works for the applicant, whereas the FSD deals with all applicants. That's our initial assessment. Well, we reckon that it can be shortened from 31 to 34 days to 7 to 8 days. So I just wonder whether there is an expanded pool. That's why. Well, it means that there is another alternative available for the applicants to find someone else in the market. So there is no streamlining of procedure. That's my understanding. I have reservations towards this legislative amendment because when it comes to registration of lifts and escalators, there may be a lack of monitoring in the private market. We see a number of incidents involving escalators and lifts because of poor regulation. You said at the beginning that is in the coming 2 years, 70% of the licensed premises will be inspected by the FSD. Would you give us a report in a year or two? Secretary, will you give us a report in the to the panel? That's something that we're happy to do. Ms. Elizabeth Quat. Well, Hong Kong is famous for our efficiency. However, in recent years, some people think Hong Kong has become slow. So any measures to improve our efficiency is most welcome. This scheme will shorten the time taken without affecting quality. The DAB will strongly support it. I heard from the Secretary that the scope may be expanded. There will be a review. If you find that it's very effective, the scope may be expanded. Will mini storage space be automatically covered, or will there be another procedure? We think that, well, there will be a review in 2 years' time, and we will consult the trade and stakeholders. The details I will defer to the Assistant Director. This is a new scheme. We have to ensure quality and safety. We will exercise caution. At the beginning of the implementation, it will apply to designated licensed premises. 2 years down the line, we will conduct a review. We will see if there are other premises that are suitable to be included. As we've said, high-risk premises, say for example, dangerous goods storage, and premises with new license might not be suitable for inclusion at the beginning of the scheme. In about 2 years' time, we will assess the professionalism, the quality of service of RFEs before we consider expansion. Dr. Edward Yield. I have 2 questions. First, in the paper they talked about a disciplinary board without mentioning its composition. The second question, eligibility. I see 3 types. First, are those that are registered professional engineer. I think it's through a Hong Kong IE. The second type's through a bachelor's degree of relevant discipline. The third type is experience with top-up courses. Since you include other disciplines for those with a degree, well, if you do it through a professional institute of the profession, then you will ensure continuous learning, continuous professional learning.
I'll defer to the department, but before they answer the question, I think I think we can certainly take up some of the suggestions proposed by Mr. Yiu. So, in drafting the legislation, I'm sure the administration will also listen to the views of the profession. Mr. Zhang, regarding the disciplinary board and its composition, our initial plan is that on the disciplinary committee, its function is to determine whether or not the RFE has been guilty of professional misconduct or neglect. So the members of the discipline committee will comprise of officers from the FSD. We will also be including academics and members of the relevant professions to join this committee. So this is our initial plan. As for the details, at the consultation stage, we will be talking to the relevant professions and academic organizations to seek their views. Dr. Lo Wei Kwok, thank you. Applying for certification from the FSD at the moment is very long, although the director told us that given us the target But because of the heavy workload and the manpower constraint, and therefore it takes relatively a long time for the application to be processed by the FSD. For many of the premises and the license applicants, the procedure is too long. The principal ordinance, when it was vetted during the last term of this council, during the last term, because of the filibustering, this ordinance, which were not controversial, were not able to be enacted, and I was the chairman of the relevant committee during last terms, so I know the background. Given the workload, and also the policy of the government now is that when you have qualified third parties, you don't really need the government to do many of the things which could be undertaken by such third parties. And that's why you've launched the RFE scheme. We're now at the stage where we're going to implement the details. Of course, I support the proposal. According to the paper, you will only table the bill to let go in 2018, and meanwhile you need to communicate with the trade and you need to consult the profession. Well, in that case, the process is going to take a very long time. By the time the registration scheme is, it will be a long time before the scheme will be implemented. In the annex, you have listed the licensed premises to be covered by the scheme. I'd like to know how much this would take up, in percentage terms of your workload, and by implementing the scheme, by how much would it be able to lighten the workload of the FSD? I'll try to answer the question briefly. Regarding the application from these licensed premises, over the last 3 years, the FSD has to process about 3,000 odd applications in the last 3 years. Leung Kok Hong, I have 3 questions. For the 3 organizations, the appeal committee and the registration committee, what are the criteria for appointment of members to those committees? And secondly, regarding the licensed premises, why have you not included the jockey club and football clubs? I'm referring to the off-course betting centers and football matches. 2 questions. Mr. Zhang, in our scheme, we propose to set up 3 committees. For the registration committee, its function. So I just want to ask about the selection criteria. Our initial proposal is for the 3 categories committees, they should be represented by the respective professions, including the engineering, surveying professions, and academia. And their members should also include FSD colleagues as well. So that's the composition of the committees. Mr. Leung, also, what about the appeals committee? Will there be retired judges sitting on that appeals committee? For the appeals committee, we are now proposing that since it will be handling professional issues relevant to the profession, or also matters relating to the professional qualifications of our FE and standard of the service and so on. So we believe that it is appropriate to leave it to the relevant professions and academic organizations to form the committee. What about football clubs and the jockey club? Well, the scheme is to provide another service organization to substitute the work currently being done by the FST, and the premises referred to by the FST do not come under to those licensed premises. I'm saying that for football matches and jockey club, you don't need to issue them with licenses. Mr. Leung, I think you are referring to the old off-course betting centers. Well, the jockey club has a whole administration block employing many people. Same for football matches. I'll give you an example. Now, if the premises are full of people and if there should be a fire, people could get killed. Mr. Leung, please let Mr. Young answer the question. Is the government providing exemption for the club? Regarding the administration building of the jockey club and what license it is covered, I don't have the information. But regarding fire safety regulation, it may not be governed by the licensing regulations. It could be governed by other legislations. For the RFE scheme, the two examples quoted by Mr. Leung will not come under the coverage of the scheme. I don't see any members objecting to the proposal to enact the legislation in respect of the RFE scheme. So with that, I think we can now end our discussion on this item. And we may now move on to the last item on the agenda, which is inshore and mountain search and rescue services of the government flying service. And we will invite Captain Michael Chan, Controller of the Government Flying Service, Ms. Edward Lee, Air Crewman Officer 1, Ms. Iris Lee, PAS for Security, and Mr. Chinsky Chan, Assistant Secretary. Members, since we have one more item yet, so I propose that we extend our meeting to 4:50. Because we will need to vacate the conference room at 5 for the PWSC meeting. Any objection? No. Thank you. If Captain Chen is ready, I would like to first of all make a request. Since we have a very tight schedule, I understand that the controller has a short video to show members, which is about 10 minutes. Could you shorten that to around 5 minutes so that we have more time for questions? Well, it's already edited for 9 minutes. Why don't I try to, cut my speech as short as possible so the member can watch the whole video? Can you, speak as we watch the video? Yes, you may play the video, and meanwhile you can walk us through the paper. Well, these are actually real cases. The first case is in the country park of Lantau. This is a place where there are no hiking trails, so it's very rugged and remote terrain. If anything should happen, then the person can only call for help with a telephone, but the rescue team will take some time to arrive at the scene. If somebody were injured, the fastest way to come to the rescue is to use helicopters. So we will arrive at the scene to make an assessment and determine whether the injured should need to be taken up to the helicopter or should he stay on scene and wait for the rescue team. Depending on the injury, that would depend on the injury. But anyway, our air crewmen will provide first aid and stabilize the condition of the person. And the crew will then determine whether or not to take the injured person onto the helicopter and take them to hospitals. Meanwhile, they can only go to Chongqing and Queen Mary Hospital. But in future, they will be able to, send them to different hospitals depending on the extent of the injuries. Unless there is a shortage of food and water, otherwise we'll take them to a safe place so that they could be where we can get support from the FSD and the CAS. In this footage, the camera is fixed onto the body of the air crewman. You see here you have a very steep cliff, and the injured person has dropped to a height of more than 100 meters. Fortunately, he was trapped in a tree trunk, and so the helicopter will lower the air crewman to a place about 150 feet above ground. And we are using a pulley and the radius is only about a quarter of an inch, and it has to be able to take the load of the person who is to be rescued. Because of the current, you'll find that the air crewman is swaying all the time, and he will need to be very fit, otherwise something wrong may happen. So in this particular case, the injured person was very fortunate because this cliff is more than 100 meters steep. If he continued to fall, he would have probably died. The next case happened in Sundown Town. After heavy rain, you'll find people who have fractured the bones on this street. So, and a helicopter would need to reverse in position when arriving at the scene to make the rescue. Well, this is Mount Shan. There is heavy fog, and the crew took a long time before they could identify the location of the persons requiring rescue. You find that the location is not accessible by road, and the injured person, the person stranded here, have called for help. When the air crewman went down, you find some people down there, and judging from the size here, you can make a rough estimate of the height or the altitude of the helicopter. So we have to make 3 attempts before we could identify the persons you need to rescue. This is also Mount Shan. Terrain is similar. The injured person had fractured bones, so we would need to use stretchers. With such a dangerous terrain, placing the injured person on the stretcher is very difficult. And when we, took the injured up the helicopter appeared to be very stable. To be able to do that, the pilot would need to go through extensive training before he could do that.
It takes about 10 years to train a rescue pilot. This is a hiker being trapped in Kowloon Peak. The person's down on the ground. At first, firemen were to get up there to take him back. However, the topography was too dangerous. So in the end, we dispatched a rescue team to pick them up. This is another one. It's one downloaded on YouTube. Ground rescue team has yet to arrive. So air rescue mission was the only one there, and the air crewman was the only team working. There might be floodlight, but the visibility was very confined. Our crew have to be equipped with special equipment, say for example night vision, to help them. Night vision will enable them to maintain visibility. However, even with that, they can only see about 20 to 30% of what you can see during the day. For small items, say high voltage cables, that we might not be able to see them. So if it's rescue mission at night, we stand a higher risk. We are exposed to a higher risk. This is last one. It's not a rescue mission. It's made through night vision goggles. We see that that's what our pilot and our crew can see. It's monochrome, green only, and there is no depth perception. So if we fly with night vision goggle, you have to go through special training. And there are some still photos. 2015, a Macau jet foil collision at night. Usually, whether it's on land or at sea, it will be our helicopters that arrive first. And if there is a major incident, say for example cruise ship, then a rescue team will have to try to use every second as possible. And also our engineering team, helicopters work in such condition. So if it flies for about an hour, it will be about 3 hours operation of a normal civil aviation flight. So wear and tear is serious. So there is great responsibility for our engineering team. Just like other service team, we are not omnipotent. Our rescue is constrained by weather conditions. Even with night vision goggles and also infrared technology, we can't conduct a rescue mission when it's misty or in a cloud, because we can't gauge the distance, and it will take us a very long time to identify the site in question. So we appeal to hikers to pay attention to their own safety. Do not overestimate their ability. Do not try to challenge themselves, and also to take into consideration the weather, because unstable weather will hinder our rescue mission. That's all for our presentation. Thank you. Thank you. We have Ms. Elizabeth Kwok, Mr. Ray Chan, and also Ma Fong Kwok, and we have Junius Ho as well. 4 members. Mr. Lo Kwok as well. I think you only have 2 minutes each. Ms. Elizabeth Kwok first. First, I'd like to thank the Government Flying Service for their professional service for guarding Hong Kong and keeping Hong Kong safe. I see that their work is very dangerous. I want to ask, what is the strength, equipment, number of aircraft? Are they sufficient to deal with workload? We have 7 helicopters, 2 fixed-wing aircrafts. Our helicopters have been in use for about 18 years, and so we have already got funding approval to replace 7 helicopters. There will be 7 new helicopters delivered to Hong Kong in batches starting from 2018. The 7 new helicopters will greatly enhance our capabilities. At the beginning few years of with the new fleet, in order to ensure that there is no impact on our emergency service, we will keep 2 small-sized Dolphin helicopters until the new helicopters are running smoothly. We'll continue to review service demand. We will review our manpower and also our equipment. If necessary, we will, through the Security Bureau, apply for funding support for additional resources. Thank you. Mr. Ray Chan. I'm also very concerned about the manpower of the government flying service. I remember 2 years ago the panel visited the GFS. There was a member. Well, someone told us that he was involved in a mission and he was slightly injured, but he didn't want to take time off. I see that when it comes to the number of calls and the number of flying hours, in recent years they have both increased. And the audit report reviewed that there is insufficient manpower causing serious, tremendous pressure, reduced rest hour, and the number of pilots on call is fewer than those required. So I want to ask, is it really the case that there is manpower shortage? I believe that you are constantly being poached by the private sector as well. I think it's you encounter recruitment problem. Is that right? Through government procedure in 2016-17 and 17-18, we have seen an increase in manpower. 2016-17, 32, 2017-18, 31. We see that you have given us staunch support of our work. But it takes a very long time to train manpower. It's not the case that you recruit them today, tomorrow they will be able to work on their own. We try to improve the situation, and I thank Mr. Chen for his concern. What's about wastage in the past 2 years? Well, when it comes to crewmen, it's quite stable. Pilots, wastage is quite serious. In the past 3 months or 6 months, we have lost 3 of them to other sectors. We try to improve the working condition of our pilots to try to keep them. Mr. Ma Fung Kwok. Between 2012 and 2016, number of calls has increased by 26%. Paragraph 11, you talked about 7 new helicopters. So how do they compare to the existing ones, that is the Super Puma? What about the range and weight and other specifications? Any improvement, will it improve your efficiency in your rescue mission? There are 2 different types, Super Puma and Dolphin. Super Puma is a large size helicopter. The new ones they are medium to large size. If you look at the capacity, well, the new one is not as big as Super Puma. However, on average with a 7, the overall capacity will be higher than a current 4+3, and there's also an improvement in our loading capacity and also our ability to travel. I would like to hear more about how your performance will be improved. Say, for example, for Super Puma it can travel to 220, 213 knots without refueling. The new one, the range is more or less the same. But don't forget that, well, we will have 7, but we only have 3 Super Puma. So if one is under repair, then we only have 2. When we have all 7, then it will improve our capability, our loading. Super Puma, 27 people. Dolphins a lot smaller. For the 7 new ones, each will carry 7 people. So overall speaking, we will have a bigger capacity. I would like to ask, what about satisfaction of pilots? I see that 699 flying hours, 29 pilots. That means every year each will fly 20 to 30 hours. So is it a huge workload or a small workload? That excludes training hours. Remuneration. Compared to in the commercial sector, how big is the difference? You said you have a wastage of 4.3. You have spent a lot of resources to train them. Well, 4 years you've lost about 4 people, so it's about 1/7 of your strength. Number of call-outs, 588. Is it the gross number, or is it well, it's the net? What about the abuse rate?
Thank you. First of all, let's talk about our workload. As members could see in the annex, the 588 on-calls were only the number. The actual flying hours were 699. So this only refers to the emergency call-out numbers. We also have other duties. For example, we would assist other disciplinary forces to carry out law enforcement actions, and we have other duties. For example, we will work with the observatory to undertake meteorological, surveys. On average, our pilot would fly about 35 to 40 hours a month. So I don't think there's a problem there. Dr. Low, why quote? The GFS is the only team providing flying service. It is a disciplinary force. It is also a professional rescue, team, and they're also professional, aircraft engineers. So my question is that in Annex 3, there's some interesting numbers. In Annex 3, we'll find for the last 5 years the statistics on onshore search and rescue carried out. And in 2015, the numbers are particularly high. Compared with 2014, flying hours 30% more, and it dropped in 2016. Why did we have this unusual, peak in 2015? Number of call-outs were also the highest. We've not done any analysis why the numbers were particularly large for 2015. Perhaps it had to do with the habit of people. Maybe more people went hiking that year. The numbers are only in respect of inshore search. So I can only say that we've not carried out any analysis as to why the flying hours are particularly high for that year. because every mission will be for different purpose. For one particular on-call mission, we may take more than a half day to finish the mission. For other simple assignments, it could be done within 45 minutes to an hour. So it will depend on the nature of the mission each and every time. So we cannot say that every mission can be completed within an hour or 1 hour 15 minutes. Thank you. So if there are no further questions, I don't think I'll allow any more questions. I think we need to vacate the room for the next meeting. So thank you very much, Mr. Controller and your team, for coming. And with that, we'll move on to item 5 on the agenda, AOB, and we don't have any other business. So thank you very much. We are adjourned.